Hollow Bridge, contract TW 200 at a public meeting of the board on June 8th, 2021. And whereas the bidding package was available for viewing starting on June 9th, 2021, Town Clerk's Office, 45 Como Drive, Woodstock, New York, at the Woodstock Highway Garage, 3218 Route 212, Bearsville, New York, and at the office of John Steinmeier, Consulting Engineer, 208 Broadway, Port Union, New York, 12466. Didn't need that there. And whereas 4 bids were received by 2 p.m. July 7, 2021, the stated time for bid opening. Whereas the low bidder is Kingston Equipment Rental Inc. at a bid price of $1,112,000. And whereas John Steinmeier, PE, engineer for contract, TW 200, finds Kingston Equipment Rental Inc. to be the lowest responsible bidder, therefore be it resolved, the Woodstock Town Board award contract TW 200 to Kingston Equipment Rental Inc. for $1,112,000 and authorize the supervisor to sign said contract.
Second.
Any questions? So this has been a long time coming. We've had a temporary bridge up there, and just a little heads up that not everybody get too excited. The bridge delivery is not until November. So what we're going to do is we're going to move forward and get started with a lot of the in-stream work, which hopefully we'll have finished by the end of September when we have to be out of the stream. Then we're going to close down the job, and the bridge deck will come next spring when they'll set it and finish up the job. So the temporary one is going to stay in there for another winter, but at least we'll be making progress.
So and remind us again, we are getting some reimbursement on this.
Yes, so the city, the DEP, is paying approximately half of this. The reason they wanted a bigger bridge to have less restriction on that stream, which heads out into the show can. So they've already paid a big portion of the engineering, and they're paying the difference between 52-foot bridge that was there and the 82-foot bridge that we're going to be installing. So they're paying for the additional. Plus, there's going to be a lot of stream bank work, riprap and whatnot, which they will also pay for. So yes, they are helping with that. All in favor?
Aye.
Only will be very happy. Be it resolved to adopt the 2021 salary list for the summer recreation department per attached sheet.
I don't think I've seen these kind of sheets.
That was all in
These
your
are all
emails.
emails. Do I have a second for? Second. We do have a copy here if you want.
I'm sure. Thank you. Now, what's the minimum wage these days?
$12.50.
You see the bottom ones are at $12.50, and some of the ones that have come back are a little higher.
Yeah. Sounds good, thank you.
The group leaders are experienced, one more experienced than the other type.
Yeah, we pay them $0.25, $0.25. But yes,
Yeah.
the group leaders are the attorneys.
Yeah.
Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
And so camp has been open, what now, Jack?
This is our second week.
It's been a wet season.
It's been a
so
very,
far.
very rainy season, but we are, thank God for the community center when it was redone and the use of the youth center, we've been able to keep camp open. We closed one day. So that's our plan. Anybody who's listening, bring your kids to camp and we'll take care of them for the day.
We're going to keep plugging away.
And they've been going out in the pool. They're getting wet anyway, as long as there's no thunder, they just roam in the pool, so.
It's been warm enough, so it's not a problem. I do really want to thank you, Lynn, Michelle, and Pam for just doing a fantastic job. It was quite a roller coaster deciding whether we were going to have camp or not have camp, and up and down, and what the regulations were going to be. And
As soon as we said yes, we said, oh my God, why did we do that?
but
But it's working out,
The
yeah,
kids
it's
are-
definitely worth it.
the kids
Parents
are having
needed
a
a
great
break,
time.
the kids needed a break, so it's working, it's working.
Thank you for that.
Good.
accept the resignation of Michelle Warren from the Zoning Board of Appeals, and be it further resolved to thank Michelle for her service.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Are you gonna advertise?
We can do an advertisement in the paper and on Facebook. And I know I have a list of about 4 or 5 people that have expressed interest. So,
Okay.
I think a few names I've sent around to you guys, but I'll double check. Whereas Brian Galunas has successfully completed his 6-month probationary period and has demonstrated proficiency in operating excavator, backhoe, paver, and grader, and has shown leadership skills, therefore be it resolved to promote Brian Galunas to grade 4.5 at a rate of 2509 effective July 12th, 2021.
Second.
These are all, by the way, there's 3 in a row, and these are all per the recommendation of Scott Bonstein. All in favor?
Aye.
Whereas Carson Battalion has demonstrated proficiency in operations and excelled in areas such as leading traffic control and safety efforts, therefore be it resolved to promote Carson Battalion to a grade 3.5 at a rate of 2280 effective July 12th, 2021.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Whereas Cody Chase is proficient in all aspects of MEO and is proven to be a valuable member to the department and showing leadership qualities, therefore be it resolved to promote Cody Chase to a grade 3.5 at a rate of 2280 effective July 12th, 2021.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So, Laura, we have about 7 minutes before we need to start the public hearing, if
Okay.
you want to offer your resolution.
Okay, thank you. And I do want to thank, there are a lot of people who had a lot to do with sharing information, and I just, a blanket thank you to everybody who's persevered, and I think we found a good path forward, but we'll find out how the board votes. So the resolution is this. Whereas wireless telecom providers and site developers have begun deploying 5G cells, antennas, and repeaters throughout New York State, and whereas the Woodstock Zoning Revision Committee, ZRC, has proposed wireless transmission facilities and site developers revisions to Chapter 260, Section 260-65, and Section 260-64, and Section 260-65 in the Woodstock zoning law/code. And whereas the Woodstock Planning Board recently denied the Crown Castle T-Mobile application for 5G antennas to be added to the California Quarry Road Stealth Monopine Cell Tower, and whereas additional applications for wireless transmitting facilities from other site developers and/or telecom wireless carriers may be forthcoming, and whereas Town Supervisor Bill McKenna and Town Board members have expressed interest in Mr. Andrew Campanelli's expert legal services, and whereas the ZRC has acknowledged on multiple occasions the need for a review of their aforementioned ZRC wireless transmission facilities and site developers law revisions by an attorney who is an expert in telecom law, and the need to include precise legal language within said ZRC wireless transmission facilities and site developers law revisions. And whereas Mr. Andrew Campanelli Esquire is recognized as an expert on telecom law by the Association of Towns and the New York Conference for Mayors, and whereas the inclusion of Mr. Andrew J. Campanelli's analysis report recommendations in legal language to create a final document will create the strongest zoning law/code possible pertaining to wireless transmission facilities and site developers, and whereas benefactors will pay for 60% of the cost of Andrew J. Campanelli Esquire fees, and the town of Woodstock will pay for the other 40%. Now therefore be it resolved that the Woodstock Town Board approves hiring and retaining Mr. Andrew Campanelli Esquire, covering 40% of his services for a town of Woodstock payment of up to $1,000, in order for Mr. Campanelli to review and make recommended updates to the ZRC's draft wireless transmission facilities and site developers law. And be it further resolved that the name of the benefactors covering the remaining 60% of Mr. Campanelli's fee will be made known to the Woodstock supervisor. And be it further resolved that Mr. Campanelli will update the ZRC's draft law using a document markup tool or other method of identifying in the document his law recommendations to clearly share his law recommendations in precise legal language. And be it further resolved that the town of Woodstock is responsible for the final law and will review and consider each of Mr. Campanelli's recommendations when creating the final document, thereby strengthening Woodstock zoning law/code, chapter 260, sections 260-64 and 260-65.
Second. Any discussion?
Well, I'd like to say a couple of things. As chair of the zoning revision committee, we discussed this last night, and it was, we had a quorum, and it was unanimous of the quorum that we should proceed with this. Steve has sent a base document. The zoning revision committee had some discussion and thought it should be tweaked. I did tweak what Steve did to make it so the zoning revision committee did agree with it. There were a couple of things that we thought needed to be clarified in it. And the thing, the reason why I think very strongly it's good to proceed is because we were going to be giving, as a law goes through the process, it goes from whoever creates it, it goes to the town board approves, sends to the planning board, it comes back to the town board, then it's going to go to the county, it maybe goes to some lawyers, and eventually it goes for public hearing. We've been planning for a while that we would be giving Steve a copy of it before the public hearing, but the point is, and we knew Steve would be sharing it with Andrew Campanelli, that's not a surprise. To me, it makes sense to have the sharing with Andrew Campanelli happen now, because I think it's been to the planning board, and the planning board came back with a single sentence, says, you know, does this follow the laws? Well, it does. So it's been through step one, and we didn't get a lot of change. I think most change will probably come from Andrew Campanelli's review, and I think it's smartest to do that sooner in the process rather than later, because I think then it will go more smoothly through the process if we've gotten this feedback now. So I believe this is the right way to go, and it's up to the board. We can discuss what is our cap. There's some discussion, should we share with the benefactor or have the town cover it? There's some discussion, should our cap be 1,000 or should it be 1,500? So we might want to discuss as a board some of those details, but I think having Andrew look at it now, I think Andrew provides a lot of great input. We as a town own the law. We reserve the right to incorporate what we choose. I expect we'll incorporate maybe everything or almost everything. That's my prediction. But we do as a town board own the law, so we do reserve the right to make our decisions on it as the input comes in. But I think getting that input, I think we're going to get a lot of valuable input, and I'd like to see it sooner rather than later.
Come on. Anybody else on the board?
I have, the only reservation I have about it is, I want to make sure the information comes directly from the attorney to the town. I don't want
Town board.
the town board, yeah, I don't want to see it filtered through anybody else.
Okay, I can make an addition there, update, providing it, I'm going to add to the second to the last further resolved where it ends with precise legal language, I will add the words providing his updates directly to the town board, or should I say to the supervisor, who will share it?
Should town board.
Okay, providing his recommended updates directly to the town board. And what you're all seeing here is you're seeing progress in action, because I just sent this out like an hour ago. You know, so this is all late breaking. We're working this, and you're watching us work it. So I know that Bill likes to have things done before we get here, but it's late breaking news, and I appreciate it being entertained.
Richard, any comments?
No, I'm fully in support of this, I have no problem with it. The only question I have, and we might want to run a check on this, the splitting of the payment is a gray area in my head. I just don't know the process that's involved here, and I just want to make sure we're okay with that. I have no problem with it, but if it's all kosher, good, all that, I just want to make sure we're on good grounds. I'm fine with it.
Well, I'll go either way. If we paid for all of it, it might be $2,500. I'll go with whatever the majority goes for.
Laura, I thought we talked about possibly setting the cap a little higher at 1,500. Because my feeling was that this benefactor, whoever it is at this point, is already donated well over that as a service to the town, and I thought we could shoulder a little bit more, be willing to shoulder a little bit more of that. Again, this benefactor is given, I don't know the exact amount, but I know it's like
11,000.
11. Okay, so yeah, so I felt like the town could be willing,
11.
yeah, that we could raise that. And it seemed like you were in favor of that.
I'll go, if you get a second vote on that, I'll go with that. I think we should address both issues. Richard's question of should we be splitting with the benefactor, and then your point about what should the cap be.
Somebody make a motion to amend the resolution.
Well, Lauren, how do you feel about splitting with the benefactor? Do you think we should split with the benefactor, or do you think we should cover the whole thing?
I think we should pay the $1,000. That's what it says here.
Correct, which is, and then the benefactor pays the other 60%.
That's if this is 40%.
And just on a legal standpoint, is it required that the benefactor can be reviewed?
Here it says.
Well, the reason,
To supervise.
the reason why.
Well, it
that-
should be to the town.
Yeah, but
In other words, it's a public knowledge.
The reason why that got added is if the town is sharing, if the town is co-paying with somebody, the town ought to know who their partner with, period.
That's me.
So you are the benefactor? Okay, so we all have an answer to that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And
It's easy enough, man.
Okay, any other, so,
I could use a loan, Steve.
so is the resolution gonna stand the way it is? We're gonna,
I don't, Reggie raised the point about going higher, I don't care. It's up to you. You want to stay with it?
Decided to make what?
You raised the point about going higher.
About going higher.
Do you want, are you making that recommendation?
I like to make that, right?
so what number do you like, Reggie?
1,500.
Okay, does anybody disagree? I'm happy to.
So is it gonna stay 40, 60 at 1,500?
With our
With the
cap is
cap at
1,500,
1,500.
and I'm looking for that in the,
so it's in the first,
oh, there it is, how do you like that? So our cap is 15. Well, yes, okay. Okay, so we've made two changes. One is, our cap is now, the first be it resolved is up to $1,500, and then in the third be it resolved, which is second to the bottom, adding this phrase, providing his recommended updates directly to the town board. I'll add the word Woodstock.
You offering that amendment, Laura?
I am offering that amendment.
Do I have a second?
And the third thing is, the benefactor's name will be made to the Woodstock supervisor and the town board. So that's a third change in the second be it resolved. Add the words "and the town board" to the second. So Jackie. Okay, on the second be it resolved, we're going to add the words "and the town board." So it says supervisor, the benefactor's name will be known to the supervisor, adding the words "and the town board."
Do we have any idea on timetable or? I don't want to pin it on, I just want, and his ability, you know.
I'll let you
know tomorrow. Okay.
I'll second.
I just want to.
So Reggie's seconding the
So we'll be
amendments,
back
the
soon.
three amendments.
Okay?
Do we
okay.
have a vote and then?
So
Reggie?
I'm gonna call the question with regard to the amendments to the resolution.
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. I'm gonna call the vote, all in favor of the resolution.
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Aye, I'm opposed.
Did you want to speak out? Do you want to speak out?
You're
on that?
opposed to,
The resolution.
in the beginning?
Yeah. The reason I'm opposed is because, Steve, you were gracious and provided us with a wonderful document that I'm not sure anybody read, but I did, and I think we should be working off that before we spend any more money. And that's my reason. It's got nothing to do with Campanelli. I think he's done a great job and provided a good document. So, and thank you for that. So, okay, you're welcome. All right. Jackie, public hearing?
At a town board? Okay, thank you. At a town board meeting held on June 22nd, 2021, the town board resolved to schedule a public hearing on local law number 1 of 2021, bill and grading law for Tuesday, July 13, 2021 at 7 p.m. at the town offices, 45 Como Drive, Town of Woodstock. All persons will now be heard.
Anybody want to talk about dirt?
Sure.
Nobody?
Mud, rain?
Playing with mud? So, just a little background to, some of you may be aware, some maybe not. About a year and a half ago, we were visited by Mr. Carolus, who started to bring in fill. and up in Shady. He created a mess up there. We're now in court over that. He's been cited, the property owner's been cited. It did go to the Woodstock court. They had to recuse themselves. I don't remember the exact reasons, but now we're up in the Shandaken court. And I believe, does anybody remember? I think next month is the schedule for the trial of July, or?
I thought that they'd be back in court the 20th of July because there was one person that had his attorney.
Okay.
Have I read that correctly?
So in any event, the board, we all agreed that we needed to pull together a law to try and make it easier to prosecute and deal with this. The biggest part of this law, in my estimation, is while we do require permits for some bigger jobs, and if a job is going before the planning board for other work, they need to take it through the planning process. But ultimately, the building inspector has the right to request receipts for any fill that comes to any job in Woodstock. And, you know, that's going to help guarantee that we know where the fill is coming from. So since there's no public comment, do you have any questions, comments, concerns, issues?
No, the only thing I expressed this before was that as long as this doesn't hurt the small operator in town, I don't see any objection to it. We've not heard any objection to it, so I guess it doesn't.
You know,
I just don't want to hurt small contractors.
I agree with you, and I think that, you know, I drafted this, this local law to really just capture in the big jobs, but still give the building inspector the ability to say, hey, you know,
Yeah.
you're bringing in 2 loads, just tell me where it came from, and we're all good. I've talked to a number of excavating contractors about that, and none of them seem to have any issue.
And that was where we started from, Bill, with that in mind.
Correct,
Right?
correct.
To not want to.
I think we all agreed that we didn't want to cause more grief. And, you know, I'll just point out, some contractors might, you know, they might dig a foundation for you, Richard, and haul the dirt up to their property and store it there and then sell it. And all they have to do is, you know, sign an affidavit that that's, you know, that the fill came from your property. So, all right, so I did not, I wasn't planning to close the public hearing tonight, but to recess it till next week, and if everybody's good, I'll prepare a resolution to adopt this next week. We're good? Okay. I'll move to recess the hearing.
Second, oh, did you second it?
All in favor?
Aye. One of the second.
So if anyone's interested in Phil, we'll be back on the agenda next week. The one other item that I had on the agenda was the moratorium. So I know we've gone round and round a little bit, and actually I did not get a chance, I only saw it on my phone here, but we did get comments back from Ulster County Planning Board, who just tonight, who said their recommendation is that we consider, I'm trying to remember, a 6-month moratorium with the possibility for 2 3-month extensions. So I'm not quite sure. I'll look into that tomorrow. The one thing I would say is that if we change it in the law, the town board has to have the law for 7 days before we can adopt it. So if we change it this week to accommodate the Ulster County Planning Board, I would have to redraft, or get the attorney to redraft that, get it to you guys, and then we'd probably call a special meeting for the following week, not adopt it next week.
Yeah, well, a lot of us have different conversations, and there is a, well, my sentiment, and I think others can speak for themselves, but the sentiment I'm hearing and my sentiment is, let's move it along. So that's my personal sentiment, is let's move it along.
Basically, so people know, we're proposing a 9-month moratorium with a possible 3-month extension. The timing basically is the same.
You know, I would also point out that the attorney we used the last time, she did a moratorium down in Gardner, I think. And somebody said Gardner? Kirk, yes.
It was good.
Yeah, and I know that, you know, partially with her help with the town board, they were able to actually lift the moratorium before the end of it. So, you know, it's conceivable that if we move quickly, and our committee is already up and running and meeting with the land use expert, Nan Stolzenberg, to move this thing forward. So I'm in agreement. I know that there was also some issue and concern about adding subdivisions to this. And Richard, you and I have had multiple conversations. I know I've had conversations with Deb DeWan as well. And I think one of the things we talked about is that the laws, state law provides that a subdivision has to follow the zoning law in place when the vote is taken to approve the subdivision. So if a subdivision started today, and any substantial subdivision is going to take a year to get through the process, including seeker, that subdivision would have to conform to what the zoning law said at the time it was adopted. So if we can get amendments adopted in 9 months, that's what they're going to have to conform to. What Richard and I talked about, and I think it's a good idea, is that we would put together a handout for anyone coming into the planning board with an eye on doing a subdivision, and just give them a heads up and say, look, we have this, we haven't placed a moratorium on subdivisions, however, you will be bound by whatever laws we come up with, and FYI, we'll do it better than FYI. But we did adopt a comprehensive plan in 2018, and it would behoove you to use that as your roadmap for roughing out your development.
Yeah, we've also talked to Kirk and Deborah DeWan, who are the heads of the oversight committee, but they're in agreement that we go this way. Not just going to go and but a bunch of people.
Yeah, and I spoke with Deborah DeWan, I spoke with both Kirk and Deborah DeWan today.
The alternative is we have to change the law, and we extend time limit here. We want to get going.
I also think it can show good faith. There is one subdivision, and we haven't had any big subdivisions in years in Woodstock. We have one presently going through the process that potentially could squeak through before, but they have really, Kirk, and I think you might even speak to this, they've really taken the comprehensive plan to heart and are following it. So we're really getting what we want if that subdivision goes through. And I think it does show good faith on our part that we're serious about this, and it's not that we just want to stop all development. We want smart development. So anyway, that's where I'm at.
I think this, whenever it goes to the applicant, we also need to be clear with the planning board. We should outline for them specifically what we're doing.
Yes.
Okay, so everybody's on the same page.
Well, actually, and what I've told the building department and the planning board is that as soon as we're set on adopting this, that we need to sit down prior and just make sure that we're on the same page, because the last thing I want is applications going through accidentally. So that is, and you can be part of that. I'd be happy to have you sit on that.
So I wanted to add too, so I talked with Kirk and also Deborah, and also I'm on the Housing Oversight Task Force, and we had a good conversation about this. After that meeting closed, we stayed on and talked about it, and I agree at this point, and I certainly wanted Housing Committee people's input. So the input, as Richard said, is let's move this along, so that's where I am today, is let's move it along. And my question about the sheet, because Deborah mentioned that too, is who's going to draft it? The sheet that we give to the planning board, this heads up to the applicant, who will draft it?
I started to write something, and I'll send it out to the board the next day or so.
So might we have this on the agenda next week as well?
If we're ready to adopt it as is, I will have a resolution to adopt it next week.
Yeah, well, that, you can ask questions.
Yeah, I am. You good? You want to do this?
I don't think much of it, but I think it's kind of a knee-jerk reaction. And I don't think it's the real problem, whether we can adjust our zoning, which we're doing. We still have an issue with variances. And we should try to tighten that up, the ethics of that somehow.
Well, keep in mind that we're not just talking about making adjustments to the zoning law. I mean, there are other, including potential tax incentives to get developers, which would be, you know, in the tax code. So we can be looking at other things. Okay, I'll have 2 resolutions next week for 2 local laws.
Excuse me, Bill, will there be a public hearing before you vote on that, or how does that work?
On the moratorium?
Yeah.
So we did have a public hearing. We had a public hearing tonight on the fill law. Both public hearings will be reopened next week for a brief time, and then we'll move forward to adopt. It was. So, okay, Jackie, public you heard?
I lost my sheet. Don't ask me now. Jello.
You never lose my tax bill.
Thank you, Reggie. Weston Blue abstained. Tony Wiedenbacher.
You want me first?
Yeah, you're next.
Okay.
You have 2 minutes, Tony.
Tony Wiedenbacher, lifelong Woodstock resident, etc.
Nice
First, I want to thank you, Laura, for your presentation and the idea that we seem to be having somebody who's going to be representing us, who's going to try to save us from the worst of it. I live up on the top of the mountain. If they put something on the top or they put it on the telephone poles, either way, I'm going to get fried because the poles go right around my house, and I'd be lucky to be able to have windows on one side of the house that I could leave without having to cover them because of the thing. So I'm just saying, I don't want to be fried. I'm glad you don't want to have us fried. Thank you for not frying. 5G is bad for the environment as well, and they've even noted that earthworms, when there's a tower, will somehow underground get farther and farther away from it, because they don't like it either. And my friend Dana Abbey mentioned that if anybody's interested in reading more about it, there's a good book called The Invisible Rainbow by Arthur Furstenberg, which tells of all the kinds of things that can happen. Electricity, we need it in every way, but it can eat us alive.
Thank you, Tony.
Did I do okay?
Gabor.
Hello. Okay, so Woodstock deserves the strongest wireless law possible. Every word of Andrew Campanelli's report must be utilized. We have seen that the telecom companies can't be trusted. The FCC is known to be a captured agency run by the industry it is supposed to regulate. That's why you are not allowed to consider people's health when reviewing wireless installations. You have the responsibility to protect the people of the town, and they seek to undermine your ability to achieve this goal. I commend you for adopting the resolution tonight. I also wish that the town had taken on full responsibility for paying the best lawyer in the country to create the strongest wireless law possible. This would ensure that the town has what is due. Thank you.
My name is Steve Romine. Greetings. I also commend you for adopting the resolution. I also agree with Bill. I wish that we would have just adopted the whole thing point blank from the beginning, but it took this amount of time, so now we're doing it. But I do want to give some caution, and that is that this idea about looking over Campanelli's recommendations, whether or not you're going to decide to accept them or not. If you would have sent this document to the Association of Towns or the other lawyer that you had, and they would have said, don't put this in there, you wouldn't say, oh no, I'm not going to listen to you, I'm going to put that in there. You wouldn't do that, because you would take the advice of your lawyers. And that's what this lawyer is. He's the best in the country. And so to have this idea that, well, and I hope you adopt all of them, of course, but that you may not adopt some of them, I think is not rational at this point of the game. The original zoning revision committee's report totally accepted 29 pages of current zoning law without any changes, except for a preamble. And what I want to say about that is, and that ties in with everything I was just saying, I don't want to, I'm not trying to badger anybody, but what I do want to get across is that from when that telecom law was instituted, I think around 2006 maybe, I'm not 100% sure, but right around there when the telecom communications first was established, there's been a lot of court cases since then. A lot of court cases, they're coming out, a lot of them, periodically. And that changes the whole ballgame. So Campanelli is up on the law because he's in the courts. He knows what judges go for and what they don't go for. And so to say that, those 29 pages have been left intact for 15 years. Okay? So we can't, they were now accepted as going to be part of the zoning revision report. So now what we have is the situation, we're going to accept his recommendations, and I think it would be unwise not to reject anything he says, and I think Bill is on board with that, and from what he just said. So that's what I urge you to do, and thanks again for adopting the resolution.
Thank you, Steve. Hold on. Anybody else? Laura?
Yeah, what I want to say, I anticipate that we will accept everything, and anything that we're not going to accept, we'll come back and ask more questions. If there's something that we question why we should add it, I think we would be asking questions before we don't, yeah. So I think the expectations will incorporate all or almost all, and whatever we think we should incorporate, we would ask questions on to get more clarification.
Cool.
So we're looking to give it good thought, but the bottom line is the town does own the law, so the town will be giving thought to each thing that gets included.
Thank you, Laura. Any other comments from the board?
Bill, there's just one other, because two people didn't talk, there's one person who wants to speak regarding the moratorium.
Okay.
2 minutes.
That's a good way to start. Yeah,
Good say.
I didn't start the stopwatch yet.
all right. Well, let me
Ready?
step on a few more people's feet first.
Go.
Hi, I wanted to talk a little bit about the short-term rental aspect of the building moratorium.
Your name is?
I'm Michael Henry, live in Bearsville, and very concerned about the short-term rental cap, how it was arrived at, what it's based on, whether it exposes the town to potential legal liability because it doesn't have a lot of sort of economic study or anything behind it. I have a personal interest in it because I've had a second home in Bearsville since 2004. My kids went to learn to swim at CNN and deep and took tennis lessons at the Woodstock Tennis Club, and we came here a lot. And then it came time that we started sharing our house back 2008 already. First through friends, and then eventually later through some of these online sites. We've never had a problem with any neighbors. We are now, I'm not a millionaire, I don't own a lot of properties, I'm not an investor. We bought this house to raise our kids part-time in the country, and now we're faced with a real challenge because we pay taxes to Ulster County, but never got notice about the short-term rental until their cap was in place. So I'm really concerned about the number of the cap. I'm wondering how it got arrived at, and I'm wondering how transparent it is. Are these caps transferable? What if someone sits on a cap and doesn't use it? The problem for us is I run a music and movement program for small kids, that's my day job, and that was devastated by COVID. We're now in the position of not probably being able to afford the upkeep of our house. If we need to sell it, we're not going to sell it to someone, a local person, we're going to sell it to some rich tech bro or a hedge fund guy who's going to keep the house off the market but never use it. at least here, we're either using it ourselves or we're renting it to other people to enjoy the community. I just had to call the piano tutor yesterday and say, sorry, we can't afford you to come. I had to call the lawnmower guy, say we can't afford to mow the lawn so much anymore. And I don't see how it's helping. The concerns about lifestyle and loud noises and frat parties next door, I completely get. I wouldn't want that next door. We've always screened our guests. And I don't think that there's really economic studies justifying that the number of the cap or the fact of the cap at all or the number really has affected housing prices in the area or is the cause of the housing shortage.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's up to the board.
Yeah,
We're done.
Yes.
Amen.
So, any more from the board? Good. Motion to adjourn? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, folks. Good meeting.